right, GM fam. Today is August 11th. It's a Friday, and it's our first Llama Party in quite some time. And we are very honored to have a amazing guest of honor here in the form of Addison, or who I've been lately referring to as Chaddison, for his role in recovering some funds from the Curve White Hat hack. Um, for those of you who don't know, Addison, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on. But yeah, I'm Addison. Got into the crypto space originally in mid 2021 when I founded Thunderhead. We started originally with providing OTC services for the Pocket Network, which, if you aren't familiar, is a decentralized RPC app chain. That turned into a staking service and then a liquid staking token called Thunderpox. And then in addition to that, we built several um, pieces of ecosystem tooling like Pocket Watch, which is a block explorer, Pocket Info, a node analytics platform, and then Lean Pocket, which was a infrastructure optimization that ended up saving about 3 to 5 million a month in costs. So now we're in the process of kind of expanding the similar playbook of staking infrastructure and analytical tooling to other nascent projects. Working on getting into the Lido validator set now, and then we're also launching a liquid staking token for Chainflip, which is a decentralized cross-chain exchange. It's called stakedflip.fi. And that's actually how I got involved in the Curve ecosystem originally, because we're using integrated with Curve for the liquidity pair between the stake token and the native token. And that's kind of how I got involved with this and been following Curve, and then which also led to the White Hat, which is what we'll be discussing. And then I'm also an incoming freshman to MIT, where I'll be studying computation and cognition.
That's so cool. So, just my little story with MIT. I went to course 15. I mentioned when I met you at in Paris. Um, and being an alum, like one of the things I've done is I've gotten to like actually be in the position of interviewing, holding some of the interviews that they hold with like incoming undergraduates. And my experience was incredible because I would literally talk to these people who were like incoming, like trying to become prospective freshmen at MIT for undergrad, and they're all so much more like accomplished, impressive, intelligent than me. I was just like sitting here like feeling completely inferior to these people who were younger than me and had like been much more successful in life, and then they all got rejected. So I know that to actually get into MIT, you have to be like a cut above even the top tier. So like when you said you're an incoming freshman at MIT, I already knew that you were like destined for something special. And this is before all like the white hat hack stuff. So like MIT is not even that big on crypto. What did you put in your application to get in? Was it like all the crypto accomplishments, or do you have like a legion of other accomplishments on the side that you use for your application?
Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, I was definitely very lucky to get in. It's like a super amazing place, obviously, with lots of great people. But I think the primary thing on my application was my company. Um, just I think by then it was like the primary things were the institutional staking service, liquid staking token, and then Lean Pocket, which I think are all like pretty unique, given their like compared to the rest of like the applicant base. Um, and then like also had some smaller things that I did previously to crypto. Like I before crypto, I was really into machine learning, so I made like an evolution simulator, along with a few other things. And then yeah, I'll just and then I really like school. Like I think a lot of like kind of crypto people and entrepreneurs like they're kind of want to like drop out or not take school very seriously, but I find like a direct correlation between what I do in school and everything else. So that's something I put a lot of effort into and did pretty well in.
Yeah, and you're gonna have such a blast at MIT. In my experience, like the courses were so much more like directly practical. That I went to like a liberal arts for undergrad, which was very theoretical,
Mhm.
discussion based. But there's so many like just actionable courses at MIT where like I could directly supplement something I was interested in learning. So, like probably the most during January they have the interactivities period where you can kind of like if you're around campus you can take these like optional classes. And back then they had a class called like how to win at Texas Hold'em poker, which ended up being like the most mathematically rigorous class I took and probably like one of the best ones. I don't know if they still offer it, but yeah, you're gonna have such a blast.
It's huge there. There's tons of kids that are crazy at it there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
cause
really looking forward to it.
So yeah, you're gonna have such a blast. I think the only downside is like I remember I had all these ambitions while I was there to like still stay connected with the outside world. Because when I went into school, I also like had a business on the side I was running, and
Well,
you end up like having so much to do within the like confines of campus for the 4 years. You're not gonna have much time to interact with the rest of the world. I hope you're an exception,
yeah,
but you started this company with
yeah.
your
I've been
brother, with your brother too, right?
yeah. It's like I originally started it like on my own with just the OTC, and then started the staking service, and then like a few months after the staking service, my brother and actually my dad as well joined.
So this is legitimately a family business.
Yeah.
So the target customer for this is people who want to stake ETH and don't want to run their own like set. Is that a fair way to describe it?
I mean, ultimately, like our technically, like our target client is like a, an ecosystem team. So like the founders of a team, and basically like our offering is we build staking infrastructure and analytical tooling, which is like all the things you need to have for like the sufficiently acceptable and like successful ecosystem. But like the things that, like the team like can't doesn't necessarily have like the bandwidth to build.
Got it.
So
Got it.
a part of that is liquid staking, like Lido. So.
Do you like by chance have like a dashboard demo that you could show off? It'd be really cool to see it.
Yeah, if you go to, I think the nicest one's probably our Hyperliquid one. I don't know if you're I don't know if you're planning to share your screen, but
Yeah,
it's
I could share my screen. Hyper.
hyperliquid.thunderhead.xyz.
All right. Yeah. Let me just pull this up real quick. All right. You can see that, right?
Um, yeah,
Tell me what I'm looking at here. This is one of your clients, Hyperliquid.
yeah. So they wanted us to build out a dashboard for them to visualize all their various protocol metrics. Hyperliquid's a decentralized perp-a-dex, so you have things here such as volume, funding rate, open interest, user count, TVL, stuff like that. So it's just like anyone in their ecosystem now has a great dashboard to visualize this stuff. And I also find it to be useful. Networks also kind of like it when you have other parties that aren't necessarily the team building out these kinds of tooling. It makes it much more appealing of an ecosystem.
Wow, these traders' net profit and loss aren't doing so good.
No, they're not.
um,
It's one of the only they listed um, Harry Potter, Sonic Inu. They'll have Rollbit on here. So they have a bunch of degen coins. It's like one of the only places where you can trade those with leverage. So it's pretty cool.
oh wow, that's really cool. If you don't mind my asking, and if it's proprietary, feel free to tell me to go away. What's the tech stack that this is built off of? Is this like something proprietary you built from scratch, or like did you white label something?
No, yeah, we use recharts for all the charts. It's just a chart library that's we customized. It has lots of parameters that you can tweak to make it look good.
Got it. But you still built this out from scratch then? If this is just a JavaScript library,
Yeah,
that's amazing. So you could legitimately compete with like Datadog or some of those big analytics Chartio tech platforms, right?
I mean, not it's not as sophisticated as them, but I guess close.
So make sure you find a way to the Trust Center and show them what you built, because they'll have a lot of fun with this.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to working with a bunch of other people there on this stuff and recruiting people.
Yeah. So what's the biggest challenge you're facing in terms of your like business at the moment?
Um, I'd say like for now it's just a pretty slow time for us. We exited the Pocket ecosystem, wound down our staking service a few months ago, and so now we're kind of just in a slow period where we don't have anything that's like actually live yet. So it's just kind of a little bit of an attrition game at this point, waiting for chain flip to go live and then hopefully to hear good news on the Lido stuff.
Yeah. Would you give any thought to pivoting away from crypto to chase like semiconductors or cold fusion or whatever the newest trend is?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I definitely plan on doing things outside of crypto in the long term. I think there's not yeah, I just think there's lots of other opportunities elsewhere that I'm interested in, that I want to pursue. So
What are some of these opportunities you're interested in?
so like I'm studying computation and cognition in school, which is essentially computer science and brain science. I think that understanding the way humans operate all the way from like a physiological level at the neuron layer all the way up to the societal psychological level is very helpful in understanding why we do the things that we do. I'm pretty very interested in BCI, like the type of stuff that Neuralink does. Very interested in second brain software, um, and then and I'm also interested in doing things uh, within crypto, but not necessarily like a crypto native type solution. So like a DeFi application, but for the world, except the people using it don't actually really know that it's DeFi on the underlying layer, since I think that's what's really necessary for actual consumers to be using this technology.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
that's kind of the general.
So, do you believe that we're going to see within our lifetime the ability to upload our brains to the web?
I don't know. I think it's originally much more difficult to have a I think having like generalized thought communication is much more difficult than originally anticipated. Like if you look at Neuralink when they originally started, that's kind of like what their idea was. But if you look at their website now, it's like trying to solve immediate healthcare issues for I forget what the term they use, but it's people like quadriplegics and like those types of medical conditions, and then solving humanity's issues tomorrow. So I like to think that within our lifetime that will be possible.
All right. Maybe an easier question. Do you think it
Looking
would be
forward to the end of it.
possible to just look at the inputs and outputs of a brain and use that to train a neural network to essentially replicate the functions of a
Um,
brain?
I don't know. I I think to some extent, yes, it's kind of what's happening for like primitive actions. It's like Neuralink's able now to have a person or not person, but like an animal control a digital object with their brain. So I think that's happening now. I think for more complex ideas, though, that has yet to be seen.
Okay. Let's get in the realm of like philosophy, I guess. Would you accept the following bargain? You can perfectly upload your brain to like a piece of software, but in the process,
Mhm.
you die. Like your physical, like carbon based self dies, but you know that there's going to be a perfect app or software program that it encapsulates everything about you, which people can copy, store, run, use however they like on the web for all time. Is that a bargain you would take?
I don't know. I would. I've thought about that before because it's interesting because it's like technically you, but it's not actually you because your actual self is dying. So it becomes like a copy of you. So I would feel as if I'm dying, but in actuality, to others, I still exist. I think, I don't know if that's something I'd necessarily, um, I don't think I would take that because I enjoy living. And although like maybe immortality is cool, it's not cool if it's not actually my soul that's experiencing it.
Interesting, interesting. Maybe it's because you're like a bit younger. So like there's still like much more time for you to
Like
like,
maybe if I was about to die, I would take it, but
yeah, yeah. So I'd take that in a heartbeat. Like I wouldn't even like ask questions. Like say like I wouldn't even see the difference, in my opinion.
mhm.
Like
Yeah,
obviously
it's
like
I
I
think
would
it's
die,
interesting enough.
whatever, but
Hmm.
I sort of don't see any difference between like I go to sleep every night and I wake up in the morning, and for all I know, it's there's a discontinuity and I'm a completely different person. But you give me the like ability to. It would depend if the program could self-run, I guess. Like I feel like what gives me agency as a person is the fact that I can, or at least I tell myself I can like affect change in the world through my brain. I don't know if the software would be able to like execute itself. Maybe if it's like running as a daemon somewhere and like launch a website or something. But yeah, I would take it in a heartbeat.
Interesting.
And I occasionally like bump into people who like say the same, but they're very few and far between. Most people like are awfully attached to their carbon based self.
Yes, I am.
No shame in that. No shame in that. Excellent. So let's transition a bit outside the realm of philosophy and like get into the details of this like horrible, horrible 24-hour period like 2 Sundays ago. Last Sunday, I can't remember
Hmm.
anymore. Time is so crazy.
Yeah.
Um, where I was just kind of hanging out and like barely checking the phone, and then I see like all of a sudden like JPEG's pool has been hacked, and I'm like, oh no, and then I see Curve is like mentioning something about like, oh well, it's probably just like a situation like Conic where they misconfigured the
Yeah.
reentrancy guard, so I don't think much of it, and then I look and I see Metronome gets hacked, and I start to panic, and then I see Alchemix gets hacked, and all of a sudden it's clear that oh this is something. So I basically like cancel the rest of my day and like I'm glued towards the computer to see what's going on. Um, Now
Mhm.
I'm not as smart as you though, so I didn't like actually think that I could like effectuate the change and like maybe fix things. But you saw that there was something going on, and I think you messaged like a bunch of people asking for connections to the team at the time because you had an idea. Like, could you talk through like what happened at the start of this fateful day?
So I was trading all the base coins at that time. So I was pretty much like refreshing Twitter like every few minutes to see like what was going on. So I found out about all the hacks like pretty much immediately after they happened. And anytime there's like I find exploits like be really interesting that like some kind of random person was able to circumvent the ideas of like an entire team and team of auditors. So anytime there is one, I'm always looking at it to like try to figure understand why it worked and how it happened. So after the Alchemix one happened, I opened up the trace to just look at it and understand what was going on. And it was a pretty simple one. You just add liquidity, add a ton of liquidity, remove it, and then you re-enter and then add a bunch more liquidity. And then after that, you can pretty much just take the whole pool because you have the whole supply of the LP token. So I was looking at that, and then when the curved ETH first exploit happened, I saw it like right when it happened, but I just continued on with what I was doing and didn't look at it again for like another hour and a half. So about an hour and a half after it, I decided to like look into it and see what happened. So I open up the pool, and I see there's like 4,500 ETH in it and like five curve. And under AMM logic, this when the ratios are this imbalanced, like I thought like why can't I just swap like a couple hundred curve for almost half the pool or several thousand curve? Um, so I begin to debug this. I first try to simulate an exchange. I see that the I do like a cast call exchange, and that fails. I trace somebody else's exchange to see why it failed. It was not that informative. It just reverted. And so I knew that from my work with all the fuzz testing that I was doing for staked flip, kind of like how curve pools worked. So I reasoned that maybe like the balances are not actually correct because of the reentrancy. So I queried the balances, the internal balances of the pool, and sure enough, the pool thought it had like 50 million curve in it or 100. I forget what the number was. When in actuality, the pool had zero curve, and it used the internal balances, internal accounting to calculate the swaps. So I was like, if you can update these pool balances to what they actually are, then you can swap a small amount of curve for the majority of the pool. So I open up the pool on Etherscan. I control F for self.balances to see where it updates. And the only place that it actually syncs the internal accounting with what they actually are is in claim admin fees, which is a function that can be called by anyone. So I'm like, oh well, all I need to do is claim admin fee, and you can take like several thousand ETH for a tiny amount of curve. So I simulate a claim admin fee. It fails. Obviously, I don't do it on chain because if I don't, because a Mevbot will probably scoop it up. I have to do it atomically. It fails. I know from my fuzz testing, as I said before, that anytime the curve pool is like super imbalanced, like there's a really large amount of one asset and a tiny amount of the other, it just fails due to rounding. So you have to like each side needs to have a minimum amount in order for it to work. So I was like, okay, I'll just donate a small amount of curve. So I in the test exploit, I donated 30,000 curve, claim admin fee, and then this actually ended up syncing the balances. So the pool then went to actually knowing that it has 5,000 ETH and pretty much zero curve. Uh, I got some curve, swapped it, and then ended up working. So for like
Hmm.
100,000 for 70,000 curve, which at the time was like 50 grand, you could get like 3,000 ETH, which is 6 million. So I found that. And at this point, I was like, this is like a euphoric like finding. I don't think I've ever felt so like excited to like find something or shocked to find something. So I was pretty like furiously typing up like an actual flash loan proof of concept in order to do this. And I ended up like running into a few issues with the flash loan. I know how they work, but I hadn't actually implemented one before. So that was when I decided that'd probably just be better to reach out to the Curve team and tell them about it. So I send a tweet out on Twitter. I'm in the Curve Telegram chat, but I was like messaging in there and no one was responding to me, which honestly makes sense. If some random guy comes in and is like, I found an exploit, like you're probably just gonna think it's a scam. So I tweeted on Twitter. It ended up getting like a ton of attention. I think someone must have sent it to someone on the Curve team because someone on the Curve team then DM'd me in Telegram. I told them that I had an exploit. Um, I didn't want to tell them exactly what it was because I wasn't sure like what their role was on the Curve team. So I was like, just tell Michael to DM me and then I'll tell him. So like about 5-10 minutes later, I get a DM from Michael. I tell him about it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is right." And then I get invited to the war room, and then that's when we start figuring it out.
That's amazing. And then yeah, so just to back up and like clarify a few points, like you didn't even at this point when you're looking at this, you didn't necessarily know or need to know that this was like a Viper reentrancy issue. You just knew that the pools were off balance and like figured out a way to kind of like hack. I won't say hack the pool, but like use the smart contract logic to update the balances. Like that,
Uh,
nothing to do with like the
yeah,
Viper.
there was no reentrancy or anything. I mean, you could make the argument that it like wasn't even necessarily an exploit because there wasn't like it was so basic. Um, but it was like obviously too good of a deal. So but yeah, I mean, I knew how the reentrancy worked, and then it was a compiler bug, but this one didn't even require any reentrancy to work.
Yeah, and of course, when they were programming the contracts, they weren't assuming that there would be a reentrancy bug. But in theory, like they could actually reinforce the contracts against such a black swan scenario by adding more frequent balance checks to update the internal balances. Right?
Yeah, that's one thing they're talking about, and then they're also considering making claim admin fees permissioned, um, because there's like no real. I think I don't know where the fees go, but I think it just goes to the DAO. So there's like no real reason why anyone should be able to call that function because if there is an exploit, then you can update the balances and do some funny logic. So
Yeah.
it's an
As it
extra
turns
safety
out,
precaution.
yeah, as it turns out, it should be. It's kind of funny because like there's no reason to, but the fee claiming process is such a cluster every week when they do it. It like you would hope that it would just be like straightforward, but there's all these weird edge cases. So I think it's just to make people's lives a bit easier in claiming the fees, in case like you're just like randomly want to do it. Um, with crv.USD, they actually did do like a revenue share for people who call functions like that. So they have it set so like if you actually call these like functions that like in theory make profit for the pool, like you can collect a small portion for yourself. Um, so I think that
Yeah.
might have also been some of the logic back in the day. But this was like when these were launched, I feel like this was like very still like very experimental stage, right? Like they didn't know exactly how a lot of this was going to work and play out on chain.
Not for sure.
All right,
I
so
think it's like a 3-year-old pool or something, 2 years.
yeah. And now, what were you using to run these tests? I tend to use Brownie because I'm like that's what all the Curve people use. We're using like Tenderly or
I use Foundry. I'm a Solidity person, so
that's fine.
not into the whole Viper 8 thing.
No, it's
So
fine.
yeah,
You
just
dodged a
Foundry.
bullet, as it turns out, using just Solidity. Um,
Yeah.
um, yeah, actually, I'm teaching myself Foundry at the moment because I want to I want to learn some more marketable skills, and Viper can only get me a job with Curve or with Urine, or maybe like Lido. Um, do you like Foundry? I'm curious. Like, what's your experience with
No, it's
Foundry?
really great. It's like super. I really like it a lot. Like I always before Foundry, I did a little bit of Truffle, and it just like made no sense to me, like having to write tests and stuff in JavaScript and having to do all your interactions like off chain. Like the Solidity mechanism just makes so much more sense, and it's so much easier to do. So,
Yeah,
and it's like super, and it's super, it's like orders of magnitude faster as well, which is really nice.
got it. Yeah, I imagine once I like get onto Foundry, I probably won't look back, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Well, I still like Python a lot though. Is my problem.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Can you write the test? Do you write the tests in Viper in Brownie,
No,
or is
so
it
it's in
in
Python.
Python?
So they use PyTest, and
Hmm.
then Ape forked Brownie. So Ape basically functions the same, but Ape does have like some Foundry plugins, so they play pretty well together.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I could see Python. I think for this though, I don't know I think it's the additional like syntax required for Solidity is pretty minimal because I think you probably still have to like specify all the types and everything anyways. So it's probably not a huge difference.
Yeah, and I used to teach Solidity at the local university, so I have like a little bit of enough experience with Solidity. It was the weirdest thing. It was like a class that was like basically like a coding boot camp at the University of Washington, where they would
Hmm.
spend the first third of the class teaching you Python. So if you didn't know Python, you got like a like coding boot camp, like 8 weeks to learn like all the basics of Python. Then 8 weeks on like the data analysis using Python, and then the final third of the class was Solidity. And there was always such a brain jump for people to, especially if they never coded before, to go from like this Pythonic syntax to like the more like Solidity curly bracket syntax. And then
Hmm.
I was always like, why don't we just do Viper? Why don't we like since they already know Python, like they can get the basics of it. But I wasn't able to convince the curriculum managers, so we had to stick with Solidity.
That's interesting. Was it like a crypto class or just general programming class?
The last it was mostly a general programming class, but the last third was focused on Solidity. So like there's a lot of blockchain like concepts that were taught.
Hmm. Interesting.
But
So it's a funny split.
I ended up getting fired for reasons that we won't get into today. It's actually a good thing
No,
though,
it's
because
all
I get
good.
like so much more time to like do random like crypto stuff, and the pay was horrible. So,
Mhm.
um, all right, so you got invited to the Curve War Room, which very small
Mhm.
group of people I have to imagine, because I'm not in that Curve
Yeah.
War Room, so and I don't want you to leak anything about what's going on in there because I'm sure it's still pretty active, right?
Yeah, so there's actually a few of them. I don't want to get like too many into the details. There's like a bigger one, and then there's a bunch of smaller ones, and then I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones that I'm not even in, discussing other things. So, um, yeah, there's like a big one for like communication stuff. Um, but yeah, and then there's a bunch of other groups to like discuss possible that we're discussing like issues and stuff. So.
Got it, got it. Now, so within this war room, like you present your idea to them, and like what happens there? Because I don't think they did it using a flash loan, right? Like they just had enough curve lying around to execute it.
And so it ended up being a flash loan. So I pretty much shared it. I shared it with the group. I basically was like, I'm working on putting this into a flash. I didn't have any curve. And I was like, I was thinking to myself, like, maybe I'll just buy the curve and then perform it. And so I don't have to spend time trying to make a flash loan. So I was considering doing that, but I put it in there. And then I was like, I'm working on putting this into a flash loan now, but what you guys are all security people, you've probably done this before, so you probably can do it faster. So one of the guys from Chain Security ends up wrapping it into a flash loan, I think like about 20, 30 minutes later. And then this is kind of unfortunate, but they inadvertently leaked it to the mempool. They accidentally
Ooh.
deployed it. They accidentally deployed the contract. And so that's how Coffee Babe was able to see it and front run it, because what all these front runner bots do is they just look for not they look for pending transactions. And then if it's a profitable transaction, they just copy it and submit it first. If it's just like a normal contract, they just try all the functions on the contract with like different fuzz inputs to see what exactly it does. And if it's profitable, then they just take it and deploy it. So the chain you can read more about it too in their post-mortem that they had, but ultimately they deployed it on chain accidentally. There's some weird configuration in Foundry where you can specify the RPC endpoint like in the command itself, the config, and the environment, and so it wasn't sure like which they weren't sure which one took priority. So anyways, it gets deployed on chain. Coffee Babe front runs it and saves it. And at the time, no one knew that. this had happened. No one knew that this was why I got front run. So we were like, we just got. I was like, we literally got beat by like 1 minute. This must be like an insider. Um, which I tweeted that, or not that it was an insider, but it was suspicious. So they ended up front running it. We're all like super annoyed, and because we thought it was like an actual exploiter that had beaten us. So that was the first one. It was pretty unfortunate. And then like maybe I think Coffee Babe returned the funds like 5 hours later, and then I think the day after, someone on Twitter like pointed out that it was that the original contract was deployed by Chain. No, it's actually my bad. It wasn't Chain Security. It was Chain Light. I mixed those two names up. Disregard what I said. It was Chain Light. They deploy it, and that's how we found out that it happened. So we ended up realizing that it was indeed kind of us that rescued it, along with Coffee Babe, who was our transition executor.
Got it,
So,
got it. And then, like, have you had any communication, directly or indirectly, with Coffee Babe?
yeah, so they ended up returning the funds. I'm not privy to any. I know there is communication, but I'm not privy to any of those.
Got it. I'm just kind of curious to know, like I mean, this is like a legendary figure at this point in my brain. This Coffee Babe, because I think someone had said she was asleep, and just her bot was running automatically and did it. I don't know if that's true or
Yeah, I
not.
don't know. I mean, the bot's really great. It's I think it doesn't deploy the contract itself. So it's like the contract itself is like a generalized VM. So it just copies like all the calls and then executes them directly from their generalized contract. It's like a pretty great system. Um, and it's like marketed like one person, but it's pretty sophisticated for one person, I think.
So it might be a whole
So
team.
it's a very cool piece of tech.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah,
played
so I
much
think
with?
I think I think all these Mev teams, these Mev bots are teams now. I think they're too sophisticated for an individual person.
I can believe that. Have you played much with Mev yourself?
No, not really. I tried to do a little bit of arbitrage like a while ago. I would say like around the like soon after Flashbots kind of launched, I was like, there's Flashbots for Ethereum. I bet the Mev market on Polygon and the other chains is like super unsophisticated. So I ended up being right on that. Like Polygon Mev bots are making an absurd amount of money, but I didn't end up making anything that worked.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been really interested to like play around with it because I run a validator node, and it just strikes me how every time like the I get selected for a block, it seems like it's not like continuous necessarily, but like the payouts get like more and more as MEV gets more and more sophisticated.
Yeah, the immediate payouts from this exploit were like several hundred ETH per block.
It's yeah, it's crazy.
I
It's
think it's
absolutely
yeah. I think
so
it's a little questionable too, like validators that receive payouts from like exploits. Um, yeah, I think I'm of the opinion that it's ethical for them to return the funds.
yeah. I haven't followed that. Have Has there been like communication or requests to the validators that receive those 100 ETH payouts to return it, or no, or do you
I
know?
don't think so. I think it's like kind of standard now that validators aren't expected to return the funds. Like that's a policy Lido has. Like during the sushi exploit, they made like a Lido validator got like 500 ETH and Lido didn't want to return it. So I don't think that's something that people are doing now. So
Got it. Got it. Like, so what's your thoughts on like just the overall ethics of like the different types of MEV then? Because it's such a like touchy subject. I feel like.
yeah, I think um I don't know, like obviously things like arbitrage are fine. Um Generalized front running is like a little questionable because like it's possible that someone could just be doing an arbitrage transaction via public mempool and then the front runner is taking that and then using it. So it's like kind of excuse me, like almost stuffed in a way. Um, I think front running is um, pretty questionable. But ultimately, the thing is with Mev is it's like if it's unethical to be extracted, there will be and ethical people don't do it. There will be an unethical person that extracts it. So I think there's a conversation to be had possibly about um, unethical Mev being extracted and then given back to users. But honestly, I think like everyone should be using a private RPC for like large trades so that they don't get sandwiched. Which is I'm surprised that more people don't do that.
Yeah, actually, if internally when you're doing the white hat hack, if you'd used one of those like private RPCs, would that have potentially prevented it from getting front ran?
Yeah, so they intended to use a private RPC. It just there's like three configuration points for an RPC in Foundry, and so they had it in one of them, but it was overwritten by like another configuration point that had the public one.
Oh wow, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that like yeah, I'm sure it was like a very like hectic situation and like I've made mistakes when deploying stuff to mainnet too, so it's yeah, it's wow. That's just wild. But this is the first white
Yeah.
hat hack. You then later like successfully executed a separate white hat hack, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so the first one, that one was like really straightforward. It left the pool with I want to say maybe 700 ETH, I think, something around there, and like a nominal, and then like 200K curve. So at this point, I was like, if the pool can be exploited when it has 5,000 ETH and 30 million curve, it can also be exploited when it has 500 ETH and 200K curve. So this exploit though ended up being much more complicated because the internal reserves again got super out of whack. So there was like a long process to figure this out. This white hat took like 6 days to do. I was pretty much like I was probably working like almost like 12 hours a day on it, trying to figure it out. So after the second white hack happened, none of the operations were working. Like they would all revert. Uh, Someone else in the white hat group ultimately determined that it was due to tweak price, which is basically a function that's called at the end of add liquidity, remove liquidity one coin, and exchange. And I think it basically just adjusts the internal price oracle based on the swap stuff. I'm not too familiar with it, but ultimately it would revert no matter what. And then somebody else in the group ultimately determined with like a trace of everything that it was because virtual price was like 0.02 and virtual price needed to be above 1 in order for it to pass. So like everyone was trying to figure out why this happened. Like it took us almost a day to like figure this out just because there's so much math that happens in there and it's really hard to debug math on a deployed contract when there's no logging. So I actually tried to recompile the pool code with like additional logging events and then like etch the bytecode in Foundry, which would have been like a really easy way to debug it, except for like I was running into a lot of issues with Foundry. But anyways, we found out that virtual price needed to increase. We thought that it wouldn't actually be able to increase virtual price that much. So like we all kind of stopped for like a day or so just thinking about it since we weren't sure how to proceed. Then someone else in the curve group was like, we can just do another donate to increase the virtual price and then repeat the exploit. I didn't really know any of the curve like details at this point, so it was all like new stuff. So I didn't even know what really virtual price meant at that time. So after they said this, I tried a few parameters, and then I was able to donate. I want to say, I think you could donate 5,000 ETH and 30 million curve, and then that would unbrick the pool. Um, so after I did that, I was like, okay, now that we have the pool in like a safe state, we should be able to drain it with the original exploit. So the original exploit was obviously really unsophisticated. They left like several $1 million of ETH left in the pool. So the parameters that they did were just like really arbitrary and didn't make a lot of sense. And actually, they were like really far off the optimal parameters when we actually found them for this exploit. So first, what I did is I added the donation, set up the whole flash loan, and then repeated this loop that the original exploiter had. And basically, what it was add liquidity, then remove liquidity of that original amount. Then you would re-enter. You would add another set of liquidity. Then you would exchange. Then remove liquidity finishes, and then you remove liquidity one coin. Remove it all as ETH, and then you swap to curve. Or no, then you sell your curve to ETH. Oh no, you it was you buy, yeah, you buy curve inside the reentrance, and then you sell to you buy ETH outside of the reentrance. So I tried it originally with like the original exploit parameters. It like barely drained any of the pool. Eventually, it would brick. So sometimes remove add liquidity would return loss. Sometimes tweak price would fail. So there's like we ultimately realized there's like a really narrow range of parameters in these loops to figure out how to drain the whole thing. So this was like pretty much the how we spent like the rest of the week. It was trying to figure out these parameters. So there's another guy in the group. I don't really know how open everyone is with like sharing their involvement. So I'll have a blog post later with like details if I'm gonna ask everyone like if they want to share it. So that blog will be up later. So I'll just refer to these people as people. There was a guy who ended up taking what I had. He tweaked the parameters and then got it down to like draining like 50 ETH or so from the original amount. So it was a continual iteration on this. We had one guy who was like re-implementing curve sim to be able to add reentrancy so that we could just do like a search problem to find the optimal parameters. I tried to do gradient descent on the parameters. Ultimately, it didn't work though because a gradient descent tries to minimize, take steps to minimize your variable as much as possible. In this case, USD value, but sometimes really large steps that drained a ton of USD amount would ultimately just re-brick the pool. So you had like an incontinuous surface, so it just didn't work. Ultimately, we just kept trying tons of different sets of parameters, and then like it was just kind of really strange like why it worked in the first place. So it was just hard to reason about why it worked, which then made it even more difficult to create optimal parameters. And then on top of that, like everyone else was just busy with like tons of other curve related things in the wake of that.
Yeah.
So um,
People house hunting
one of
Mitch.
the yeah.
Yeah.
uh, so what do you say?
Oh yeah, just Mitch having to like also at the same time sell off 60 million worth of curve or whatever to like keep his position afloat, like having to like do a ton of OTC
Yeah,
sales, I'm sure distracted from the like what he wanted to be doing, which was I'm sure like focusing on this.
yeah. The whole curve team was like everyone in the group was like super busy with stuff. Um, but ultimately, what the key insight was that if you ultimately what this reentrancy allowed you to do was when you remove liquidity, didn't add liquidity and then an exchange, and then when remove liquidity finished, it would essentially like reset the balances to what they were prior to the remove liquidity. So it basically allows you to like inflate the pool's internal balance of curve like massively, which then allows you to add in as much curve as possible to try to take out ETH, and then you can buy back the curve with like a tiny amount of ETH. So ultimately, the insight was that if you add as little liquidity as possible, like in the reenter, so it was like 10 to the 10 ETH, which is like I don't even like less than a thousandth of a penny or something of liquidity, you then re-enter and that remove liquidity, and that makes it work as efficiently as possible. Uh, and then the other thing too is like sometimes you try to swap, and then because the internal balances were so wrong, the pool would try to send you more tokens than it actually had. So we had to like calculate the optimal amount to only take what the pool had. Um, so yeah, this was like the parameter optimizations, uh, and then ultimately we ended up producing an exploit that was able to recover approximately 85% of the pool, paid a 45,000 curve and flash loan fee, left approximately 45 ETH in the pool. We couldn't get the flash loan fee or the ETH lower than that. So then we got one of the guys from Flashbots to help us submit the payload. Um, he submitted it. It ultimately didn't work. It was kind of weird, like the gas estimation. It was estimating that it used 29 million gas, but for some reason, none of the validators would accept it. So we assumed that maybe it was actually just using more than 29 million gas for some reason. So had to do a little bit of gas optimization to reduce it. Ended up reducing it to 20 million gas. The guy from Flashbot submits it, and then boom, it's recovered 70,000 curve, 356 ETH, and sent that directly to the Aragon controlled address by CurveDAO.
Got it. So now the status of the pool is it's completely drained, or is there still a few like way left in there?
Yeah, there's still like 50 ETH left in it.
All right, so it's like we might be like continuing to just see like Zeno's like paradox, where like you can keep like trying to squeeze a few more drops out of it, but at some point it's going to be like a year of math to get like a tenth of an ETH or something.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, something like that.
This is just wild. This is so fascinating, man. I wish I could like go on for like 2 hours and like get even further in the weeds on all this. All right, so let me switch to like private gumshoe. Like I'm like just a unsophisticated observer, and I'm trying to psychoanalyze what's going on here and like figure out like what's going on. So like, tell me like what if you agree or disagree with this kind of like conjecture on my part. So I've been trying to figure out like
Mhm.
I don't think that the way that the hacker found this, going back to the very first exploit, the very first hacker, I don't think that the way that they found it was because they like looked at the Viper history and uncovered this reentrancy bug. Um, I think that they looked at the Conic hack. They saw that there was like within the Conic hack there was like a clear case of like a reentrancy guard issue on the Conic contract, which is why initially
Mhm.
the PETH was assumed to be like similar like faulty contract. And I think they just kind of said, okay, there might be, something going on with these curve pools that maybe has this issue. Why don't I just try like fuzzing over a bunch of different curve contracts, random reentrancy attacks, and see if anything comes out? And I think they just happened to stumble across the PETH pool and said, okay, let's go ahead and just run this because it works. Because my supposition is that if they uncovered and knew the like 0 day hack in Viper, 0 day bug in Viper, I don't think they would have started with the PETH pool. I think they would have started with the curve ETH pool, which had like the most liquidity. So it just doesn't make sense to me that they figured it out and then chose to attack the one of the smaller size pools. Like, what do you think of my like Sherlock Holmesing here?
Oh yeah, I for sure agree. There's a lot of people that think they found it by digging through Viper history to find the bug, but judging by how unsophisticated the attacks were, it was definitely something they just stumbled across. So whether they were just like doing, as you said, looking for other reentrancy issues in the wake of the conic read-only issue, or they were just, I don't even know, like doing some sort of manipulation on the pool and then realized they could re-enter somehow. Yeah, it was definitely something that they just stumbled across because if it was someone who is intelligent enough to find the bug, or they were searching for it intentionally, they would have used a private RPC. They would have drained all three pools in one go.
Right.
Um, so unless it's psyops and that's what uh, they actually did find it in the Viper history and are trying to play stupid, but that's unlikely.
So
Or I mean, it is possible too that they just maybe not this, they're necessarily looking for a compiler bug, but they just stumbled across that specific issue. Maybe they're doing something else tangentially related and it came up. So that could be a possibility too. It's definitely something they stumbled across though, in either capacity.
yeah. And then I'm also trying to pin down the number of actors involved in this. And I think there's probably three is my guess, but you're a little closer to this. You might have a better like guess. I'm guessing there's like the first person that attacked the PETH pool. And then I'm guessing that this inspired a copycat person that realized they could attack like the other pools and was able to successfully drain Alchemix. But then they were in communication and like got back and returned the funds. The MS pool that got front ran, so like I don't know, like that might be a fourth hacker or something. But I suspect it's like one of the others is just like seeing this in real time and like trying to like execute. But it just seems like there's like a number of like sloppy points in the execution that makes me think that like this is just like copycats rushing in to see what they can do. And then this Curveth hacker is the one that I can't figure out like their psychology because there's been no communication from them since it happened. So like part of me suspects it's like Lazarus Group or something. Like not Lazarus Group because like the time zones, like I know I I don't like suspect that like they're staying up that late in Korea to like run this. So I'm thinking like Eastern European hacker cell or something sees what's going on and they drain it and they successfully drain it to like the like hacker cells companies like multisig and now like the big bosses are sitting there trying to debate what to do but they're not answering anything, right? Like um I don't know, like that's my like my left curve supposition. Like what's your like take on my gumshoeing?
Yeah, there's definitely many actors involved. There's the PETH exploiter, then there's the front runner of the PETH one. I'm pretty sure there was multiple. I think there was Coffee Babe and there was another front runner too. So I guess we can just start with the front runners. You have Coffee Babe, you have the other guy, then you have the PETH exploiter, then you have the Alchemix exploiter. The MS ETH exploiter could possibly be the Alchemix exploiter, as those were the same thing. Could be different though. And then you have the crv.eth exploiter. So you have six different entities involved in this. The crv.eth one's different, definitely different because the exploits for the ETH pools is like really simple. It's just like one reentrancy, whereas the crv.eth one is like a loop of multiple reentrancies. So it's definitely a more sophisticated person to figure that out. Although it could just be luck too in that situation. But yeah, they're not heeding, it seems, to the bug bounty requests. Although I'm sure there's more going on that in private.
Yeah, I can only guess what like exactly is going on there. But like I was affected by the Curveth one, so I'm hoping for a successful resolution, of course. But mostly, I'm just happy to see that like this didn't prove to be an existential event that would have like killed Curve. Because for me, that would be devastating.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like in a way, it's like a little bit of a learning lesson for the whole ecosystem where like if you're relying on your compiler for some certain functionality, then you shouldn't assume that it's going to do it properly and you should have like a test for it anyways. And I think that extends too to like any sort of library you inherit. So like if you're relying on Open Zeppelin or Aragon for some sort of functionality, then you need to do your own due diligence and test it out as well. So like it's something I learned like going to be implementing for staked flip. Like now any sort of like originally it was just I'd originally just had tests for like the logic I created. But now like any sort of governance logic or Open Zeppelin logic, like I'm adding tests and stuff for that because you need to
Mm-hmm.
have all your bases covered, it
Yeah,
seems.
but in my experience, like reentrancy is so tough to test for. So it's like really tough to figure out like at least using like Brownie or like Ape, there's not a lot of easy built-in ways. Does Foundry have like good reentrancy like test capabilities?
Um, yeah, I mean, it would have to be difficult because I think reentrancy is something you kind of just have to like think about and figure out. So it's like anytime you're making an external call, like ensure it can't call back, and then also make sure you're doing your state updates prior to doing the call. And so I think that's just like a development practice people have to do a better job of implementing. And then also not use native tokens. Like I feel like just use the ERC20 WETH on whatever chain you're doing because that's just like so much more complexity because anytime you send ETH, now you have to worry about reentrancy.
Yeah, what's
So
really sad about this whole situation is Viper like was talking about in their new like newest version 4, including basically reentrancy protection by default on all contracts unless you explicitly disabled it. But like obviously like this was caused by a bug in their actual non-reentrant decorator. But it's just like they were like so close to like the target in terms of like what they could do to make people safe on this. And it just really, I don't know if you got a chance to talk with the Viper team, but they're great.
yeah, I've talked to them a little bit, some of the guys there.
So
But yeah, I mean, it's like it'd be kind of similar to like Open Zeppelin's reentrant lock somehow having some sort of issue too. And like these compiler, it's like a matter of incentives. People are less inclined to work on compilers as they can work on other projects that possibly make more money. So,
yeah,
and it is a very old vision too. So it's just something everyone needs to remain vigilant of.
yeah. What other
And
lessons?
there's been lots of discussion too about like additional bug bounties for compilers. So
Yeah, the compiler state is just so sad because it's like open source software. Like people work on it as a passion
yeah.
project, but there's no money in it. So like, what's as a very very wise freshman going into college? What other lessons do you have?
Um, I think there's just a lot of things too that would have been nice to have prior to this, which I'm going to work on now in case something like this comes up again. I'm going to have generalized flash loan templates ready. So like having all the interfaces prepared for like Aave, Balancer, Uniswap, and then have the addresses in a registry for every chain. so that if I ever find something again, I can just plug it in and all the underlying infrastructure is ready to go. And then the same thing goes for private RPC. Like have that ready to go, so I don't in case something happens, I don't need to spend time figuring it out. Like it's just all the infrastructure is prepared for because all that stuff is easy to prepare for ahead of time. Um, and then yeah, I think the other things too about like just increased testing and not and even like things that are your dependencies, you should still test and don't just trust them, verify them.
Man, MIT is lucky to have you, man. Seriously. Like I, I see why you got in. You're absolutely brilliant. You know the meme of the person standing in the corner at the party, like they don't know. I feel like that's you. Like they don't
Mhm.
know. I'm just like I'm one of the smartest people in like this entire space.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Are you
I
gonna
actually
do?
have that as my Twitter. I actually have that as my Twitter banner. I put that up like in school because I was like in school. Uh, it was just funny because I made it like once I was sitting at lunch and I was like sitting at this table with a bunch of other people and I was doing a bunch of crypto stuff and just like no one had any idea. So I made that
Yeah,
my Twitter banner.
and like and we talked about this in person, but MIT is just like not super into crypto for some reason. So anyway, I hope you're gonna like change that because in my opinion, gonna be the coolest kid in school there. So I hope you inspire people to like look down the crypto rabbit hole.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, I definitely plan on crypto pilling people. It's a great industry to get like a foothold in, especially if you're young because it's fully permissionless.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
So,
it played out here where like someone who was like an incoming freshman was able to like be a core part of this team. So like people in high school can like have a role to play, which is like really cool.
yeah, for sure. It's great.
Excellent. Any parting
I
words
just met
after?
some I was gonna say I met some other dude too who like made a tomb fork. He's like 17. He's a year younger than me, and he had like 400 mil TVL or something. So it's just crazy,
That's
like
awesome.
what you can do in perspective of age.
Well, I'm sure I'll bump into you through like some sort of like, event with the MIT Crypto Club. I have to jump in just a second, but like any parting like questions, thoughts, wisdom you want to share?
Um, no, just appreciate this interview. I think this whole thing is like very serendipitous because um, like I originally just got involved with Curve to because we were gonna have our liquid staking liquidity there, and so that's how like I learned about it originally. And then I even reached out to you like a really long time ago just to ask you questions about like the voting and bribing mechanisms. And so now I'm here more ingrained into the Curve ecosystem. So I just think it's a great. I really enjoy the community. Like I find the math behind all these mechanisms to be super interesting, and by far like the most complex and innovative stuff in the space. So happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks
Mitch's
again.
math tends to like be like moths flying to a light bulb. Like you get all the like people who like math like just being like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" So yeah, I wish you joined like the Curve community under better circumstances. But yeah, so happy to have had this interview. I will have to have you back to talk more because it's just like one of my favorite chats so far. But I do have to jump. I told you I had a hard stop at 9. I'm already past that. Everyone find Addison on Twitter at 0xAddi. Or if you're at MIT, he'll be maybe dorming with you soon. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and we'll catch you all later.